do one Saturday afternoon if your doorbell suddenly rang. So you roll out of your armchair, you shuffle to the door, and you pull it open. And to your shock and amazement, you're confronted with glaring lights, video cameras, and a guy holding a huge, oversized check for $10 million. Against all odds, you have won the sweepstakes, the lottery, the big cash giveaway. What do you think might be your first reaction? The film shot of most of these people, big winners, usually shows them with their mouths and eyes wide open, dancing around, screaming, "I don't believe it, I don't believe it!" Two conflicting emotions are going on at this time. First, your disbelief that stems from the reasoning that nobody ever wins these things, and the odds against winning are astronomical. Coupled with that second is unbridled joy. Yes, it's really happened to me. Our lives are changed forever. It's what we've always hoped for. And you have all these plans running through your mind of what you're going to spend all that money on. Sweepstakes or lottery winners are probably our best current examples of how people look and react when they disbelieve with joy. Luke's description of the reaction of the disciples displayed when the risen Christ at last appeared before them is perfect. They disbelieved for joy. When Jesus had died on that cruel cross that had sealed away all of their hopes in that lonely tomb. Maybe deep down they still remembered hearing Jesus' words about his death and resurrection. But like winning a big lottery jackpot, the chances of such a miracle actually occurring were perhaps in an eternity. Still, wasn't there that one slight little chance? As Jesus suddenly stood in their midst, the fear and denial that first seized the disciples' minds and hearts was still tinged with that 1 in 10 million hope that they'd had. And as Jesus spoke to them, that tiny flicker of faith suddenly erupted into joy. Joy that wasn't looked for, and joy that was unexpected, slowly spread out over the disciples' hearts and consumed their whole beings. The miracle of the resurrection had happened. The proof stood before them calmly eating fish. When was the last time we can remember being consumed with overwhelming, unexpected joy? By its very nature, we don't expect to encounter such joyfulness in our lives on a regular basis. And it seems our carefully scheduled, minute-by-minute monitored lifestyles are especially designed to get rid of and the possibility of unqualified, unlooked-for joy from all of our life experiences. We expect to be harried and harassed, stressed and sapped, it seems. At best, we hope to schedule a little time for peace and quiet, maybe a little fun in our lives. But joy? Surprise, according to liturgical tradition, this third Sunday of Easter is known as Jubilate Sunday, Joyous Sunday. This is the day the church has set aside to allow itself to be surprised all over again with the joyous news of Jesus' resurrection. The Sunday gets its name from the first word of Psalm 65 as written in the Latin Vulgate. For centuries, the church has used Psalm 65 as the introit to this Sunday's worship. Jubilate, jubilate, be joyous. This is a day of unexpected good news. Now let's tell the truth. When we consider all the possible places that we might find ourselves surprised by joy and disbelieving for joy, is church the first place that we think of? Probably not. Maybe we hope to encounter joy at some special family function, or maybe when seeing old friends, or catching sight of a beautiful sunset. But coming to church services early Sunday morning probably isn't our first pick of potentially joyful moments in our lives. And that's our own fault. Church should be the place where we expect to be shaken by the Spirit and tickled to our toes by the power of the good news of the gospel. But the church has allowed itself sometimes to become kind of stodgy instead of witty, just in our heads instead of celebratory, respectful instead of rambunctious, don't we kind of tell our kids to kind of keep it down in church? Not to be so joyful and scrumptious, and when they're getting wiggly, we try to keep them quiet. We've trudged along the well-worn path of predictability for a long time. So now that the church all too often operates with a dangerously high deficit of delight. Well, if you had been in First Congregational UCC in Hutchinson last Sunday, you would have seen and felt very differently. You see, that church has the tradition of celebrating Holy Humor Sunday. And I was their pulpit supply last week. And I had never done a Holy Humor service before, and I was a little anxious about that. I can do a regular service, especially since I can pull out old sermons. Well, that wasn't a sermon you could just pull out of the hat. And then, of course, I ended up working unexpectedly Friday evening and Saturday, so I'd lost some of my prep time. And so I was kind of sweating it. But it was kind of percolating in my mind as I was going about the days. And so last Sunday morning, I kind of threw a few things together that I had been kind of percolating in my head. And I had my robe on that day. But like usual, I wore slippers on my feet. For two reasons. One, because it was comfortable. And two, because it was Holy Humor Sunday. And why not do something unexpected? Everybody, when they came that day, got a sticker. We were hoping to find smiley face stickers, but we couldn't find any. And if they found them, they probably were itty-bitty tiny little ones that you couldn't see. And we wanted big smiley faces. And so they all said, something that they were important, or I didn't buy them, so I don't remember what they, and I didn't get one. But they had all kinds of cool things. There were puppets that interrupted me telling jokes throughout the service. They did have my permission, though, to do that, and I'd given them some of the jokes to tell. And I'd said, if you want to tell a joke, just go, Pastor Penny, Pastor Penny. Well, one of the puppets was a little old lady with glasses and pearl necklace, and she told the same joke probably 5 or 6 times. And by the end of the service, we were all giving the punchline. This was the joke she told. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. And so every time she'd go, I'd go, yes. She'd tell the joke. I had told the congregation to expect the unexpected, and that I didn't even know everything that was going on. And that was very true, and it was even more true than I knew. Because the man who was the worship leader for the day never got the email that I sent him telling him what I would like him to do for the service. Or maybe he forgot that he was the worship leader for the day, because he's also the head of the search committee. Or maybe he thought that since Pastor Cindy wasn't there, he didn't have to do it. I don't know exactly. It was probably a combination of all those things. And I didn't find this out until, I don't remember if it was the middle of the service or after the service was over. So it came time for the call to worship, which I wanted him to lead, and I'm like, Jack, you can come do the call to worship now. And he kind of looks at me like, okay. Didn't know what I was talking about. It was later I found out that's because he didn't know he was supposed to be doing it. But he's a good sort, so he did it. So we had unexpected things happening. We laughed at silly jokes, at the unexpected things that happened, like people interrupting me in the middle of my sermon to tell a joke. And we laughed at lots of things, whether it was really planned or not. There was a time that we could be joyful and laugh at silly things. And here's one of the little stories that I told that I think kind of fits with our appearance from Jesus today. A pastor was speaking to a group of second graders about the resurrection of Jesus when one student asked, what did Jesus say right after he came out of the tomb? The pastor explained that the Gospels didn't tell us what Jesus said. The hand of one little girl shot up. I know what he said. He said, ta-da! I think she's right. What do you think? I think he probably went like, ta-da, I'm here. As only a second grader can do, right? We need to be joyful. And worship does have times when it needs to be serious, but it is okay to laugh and to be joyous in church. As every politician running for office in the last decades has rallied against the sin of operating our government in the red, the national deficit our national deficit is calculated in numbers so large that we can't even comprehend those kinds of numbers. And they promote that the number one, that's a huge danger to our national health and future security. Well, the time has come for the church to take its delight deficit, I think, just as seriously. If this deficit is the legacy that we pass on to our future generations, We can be sure that our congregations will continue to grow smaller and stingier and sourer, to get more grouchy looking all the time. We need to be delightful as well. As Christians, we feel duty-bound to spend all our time talking about judgment and justice. But where's the joy? Why are there no dialogues on delight? In Matthew 25:21, the well-pleased master congratulates his servant by proclaiming, "Well done, you have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Being joyful is not some silly sentiment that serious Christians should make fun of. Taking delight in life, living life to the fullest, is what God intends for the people of faith. Business consultant and futurist Tom Petters wrote a book called The Pursuit of Wow, Every Person's Guide to Topsy-Turvy Times. The corporations of the future, he argues, exhibit an attitude toward life that he calls wow. Wow is releasing and unleashing the energies of the universe in one's life. Wow is service with soul. Wow is experiencing life to the fullest and living full throttle. Maybe a resurrection Christian shouldn't count their blessings so much as count their wows. R. Scott Glazier, when pastor of one of the largest disciples of Christ churches in the country, wrote that Jesus too lived with wow. His wow revealed a good news God, not a bad news God. His wow revealed a God who was ready to love, not ready to push away. His wow revealed a God who picks people up after they make mistakes, not a God who pushes people's noses down even further in those mistakes. The God of Jesus is a God of acceptance, not a woe God of fear. That's the wow of the essence of the good news. Even the cruelty of a Roman cross couldn't stop the Jesus wow from fulfilling the world. He wowed them even more by coming back to life through his resurrection, living through his disciples and living even today as we feel his presence in our lives. When Jesus emerged from the baptismal waters, the God's voice proclaimed, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Actually, the best translation of the Greek here is, "This is my beloved Son who brings me great pleasure." Don't parents say that about their kids? Their kids bring them great pleasure. Jesus delighted God. Jesus enabled the divine to feel pleasure at his faithfulness. You and I were created to experience God's pleasure and to bring God great pleasure. So why is it that as congregations, sometimes we don't seem to recognize or register the explosive joy that's contained in the good news that we're supposed to preach to the world? Paul Fries wrote, "These encrusted souls of ours, like rusted tuning forks, have all but lost the capacity to vibrate to the frequency of delight. They must be cleaned, refreshed, renewed. Delight is another name for spirituality. We were created to bring pleasure to God, to find pleasure in life and to bring pleasure to each other." In a speech, the essayist and environmentalist Bill McKibben observed that the only subversive thing you can do in society without limits is to have more fun than anybody else. And whatever the purpose of human life may be, it can't be channel surfing. Look around and you will see that life is overflowing with what Howard Hanger of the Jubilee community calls LPPs, little pleasure possibilities. Starting on this Sunday, why don't we renew our commitment to creating some of these little pleasure possibilities in the midst of the church? They're one way that we can begin to slowly dig our way out of the delight deficit that haunts our churches and hollows out each one of our souls. Unfortunately, the delight deficit throughout our culture is so great that it really takes pathetically little effort to inject unexpected joy into the lives of others. I mean, look at how much you guys have smiled during my sermon today. One day, you and I will stand before God. We will hear from God one of two sets of words. The worst thing that you can hear is, "Depart from me. I take no pleasure in you." The most wonderful thing you and I can hear are these words: words that will ring through the end of time. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have brought me great pleasure, and hopefully lots of smiles as well. Amen.